YouTube, and then I guess we can start.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. How's your day been?
It's been all right. Busy. How's yours been?
And today I had a day off work. I did absolutely nothing. So
Hmm.
okay, all right, it's working. It's working. Okay. So I guess let me put the YouTube there. I want to put it on my Telegram, and then we can start.
Okay.
Um, okay. So I guess are you ready to start?
Sure. Okay. Would you like me to make the opening statement?
I guess like we could both start with like a basic like introduction of ourselves, our basic views and everything, and
Yeah.
where we align. So yeah, the topic of this debate is I guess regarding fascism and the like broader implementations of fascism and what fascism is.
And like how whether it renders service to capitalism.
Yeah, like all that. So I guess you could start off. So I guess make your starting statements.
I'm Ian. I'm a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, and I will be arguing against that. I'll arguing for that fascism serves capitalism.
All right. Yeah, and tell us about like I guess like your basic views, the like general like overview of your ideology and how you like your basic understanding of fascism, and then I guess I can like uh
Okay.
start with myself.
So I believe Maoism is the third stage of revolutionary science, the ideology of the working class, and I believe it will inevitably lead to socialism. And my views on fascism is that it's simply a last resort, so historically speaking, it has been the last breath of capitalism.
Okay. Is that all, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that's all.
Yeah. So I am like I'm paleo leftist. This is my YouTube channel, and I have a Instagram at Darkwave Aesthetics, and I would consider myself a third positionist and a national socialist. Right. I advocate for socialism, though not Marxism. I believe that capitalism and communism are both two sides of the same sort of coin. And generally, I feel like fascism and national socialism have been completely misrepresented by the media, by like mainstream academia, and I would like to challenge that fascism serves anything like has anything to do with serving capitalism. So
Okay.
yeah, I guess you can start Ian. So yeah, like what's your argument?
Okay. Well, we can start off with fascism's founder, Nina Mussolini. I mean, before World War One, he was a socialist, and he was organizing for socialist causes, and he was a socialist, great one. And the Italian upper class again tempted him with power and financial support. And then he switched sides, and then he went from being a socialist to being someone who broke strikes on behalf of financiers and landowners. And using the large sums of money he received, he projected himself to the leader of a movement of black shirts who spent their time attacking trade unionists, socialists, communists, and farm cooperatives. And it was based and has been based off of the support of capitalists, and they funded him, and he served them.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or is that would you do you want me to give my sort of response to that or what I think of that?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, so I feel like I should start off with a quote from Mussolini, right? Him saying, "We aren't interested in having the capitalist bourgeoisie as an ally in the fight against the Red Menace. Even in the best of the cases, it would be an unfaithful ally that tries to make us serve their interests, and it has done more than once with some successes." So Mussolini is talking about how he disagrees with working with capitalists against communism. Furthermore, I think like you said like the big capitalists, like the big industrial capitalists and stuff in Italy, like tempted him with power. Um, that was one of your arguments, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like if you look at Italy, right, and this is a quote from A.James Gregor's book Mussolini's Intellectuals, and he talks about this argument. And he says the argument, fully articulated as early as the middle years of the 1930s, three identified fascism as a reactive product of industrial capitalism. The economic depression of the 1930s convinced many that industrial capitalism could no longer realize a rate of profit that might sustain the system. The consequence, the argument proceeded, was a desperate search by finance capitalists for quote unquote reactionary political instrumentalities that could effectively resist the inevitable and irreversible catastrophic collapse of the system. Fascism, according to the argument, provided precisely that instrumentality, all of which implied that one would expect fascism to make its appearance exclusively in mature and non viable industrial economies. Today, given what we know, none of that is in the least likely, for not only has capitalism not entered into the final crisis anywhere in the world, but fascism was first successfully in marginally fascism was first successful in marginally industrialized Italy, in a nation that had only begun its industrial development. Italian industrial capitalism was hardly at the end of its life cycle. It was little more than its commencement. So what it's saying was that like when Mussolini came into power in Italy, like Italy was like not industrialized whatsoever. I mean, they had begun their process, but there was not even a developed capitalist class. Furthermore, at the end of like when Mussolini like was killed, and like after World War II, Italy implemented capitalism, and their economy like went through a growth. Capitalism was definitely not at its last legs. Like capitalism is not at its last legs like today in like any or most countries.
So I would argue otherwise, because after World War II, Italy was in a post-war recession. Investments, for example, stagnated. Heavy industry operated below capacity. Cooperative agribusiness exports and profits were declining. And to maintain these profit levels, landlords and industrialists who had to slash wages and raise prices.
Is this you said post World War II? Is it, did you say post Depression?
Post World War One, I'm sorry.
Post World War One. Yeah. Post World War One, like Italy was like going through a severe recession, but again, like there was not really any sort of capitalist class. What happened was like under Mussolini, he fixed the problems of the depression by implementing at the very beginning, he implemented liberal economist and to build up productive forces and to sort of undergo. It was similar to what Lenin did, where he underwent like a form of state capitalism. But once that was over, Mussolini started implementing his like national syndicalist economic system, his corporatist economic system, which was not capitalist whatsoever. It was a form of like what you could say guild socialism. There's a quote from Mussolini where he says, I am a socialist. I adapted socialism to its most realist circumstances, which is corporatism. And what corporatism essentially is, here's a quote from Mussolini. Hold on, I'm trying to find it. Yep, there it is. And it talks about corporatism, right? It says the corporate state is based upon industrial and occupational organization, as opposed to the regional or geographical methods of government in place in today's society. This feature will be common throughout the entire system. Both of the government and representation and must be grasped as an absolute fundamental principle of corporatism. This idea proposes that society and the economy of a nation should be organized into major interest groups called corporations that function similarly to medieval guild systems. Workers would be organized along profession and industrial lines, and representatives of those interest groups would settle any problems through negotiation and joint agreement with state oversight. Under corporatism, the labor force and management in any industry will belong to an industrial organization such as a guild, syndicate, or corporation. Representatives of the group are elected into an assembly of labor and management that settles issues through collective negotiation. The duties of these corporations can be divided into three core categories: the regulative, planning, and social aspects. Each corporation must regulate the relations between the various factors of production in the industry. It controls through negotiation. It must also plan the development of the industry or the closing down of a redundant plant by working with the state and various entrepreneurs. Finally, it must take heed of the social amnesties of the social amenities of those engaged in the industry, their industrial insurance, superannuation, etc. So yeah, it's talking about like a guild system, a syndicalist system. You know, it's called corporatism. It originated before the like term corporations was coined as a capitalist term. But essentially, what it's talking about is a sort of guild system where workers organize into guilds and they elect representatives and they partake in sort of economic policy.
Okay. So first, I will address you saying that wasn't completely capitalist, then I will go to your later statements that it helped labor organizations. So you would be correct. That wasn't completely capitalist. There were Italian workers, there were Italian peasants, and large landowners. But either way, these large landowners and industrialists were serving Mussolini and funding him. So going back to the post-war recession, to maintain profit levels, they would have to slash wages and raise prices, but they weren't afraid to do this completely. Sorry, they weren't afraid to do this completely, because in 1921, many Italian workers and peasants were unionized and had their own political organizations, with demonstrations, strikes, boycotts, factory takeovers,
right. Wait, hold on.
and even the occupation of farmlands.
Hold on, wait. I accidentally like left the thing. I pressed the button. Could you repeat that again? Yeah.
Which part did you leave at?
I think like when you were starting to talk, I like there's a button on my mouse and I like pressed it and it like left the thing. It's a really annoying button, but could you repeat that? Like from where you? Yeah.
First, I'll address you saying it wasn't completely capitalist, and I will address the later statement that it helped labor organizations. So, as we both know, Italy was in a post-war recession after World War I, and to maintain profit levels, landlords and industrialists had to slash wages and raise prices. And they weren't completely free to do this because in 1921, the many Italian workers and peasants were unionized and they had their own political organizations, strikes. They even had factory takeovers. And to impose like a measure of atrocity onto the workers and peasants, the ruling economic interests would have to abolish democratic rights, which helped the masses defend their living standards, and the system was to smash their unions, their political organizations, and their civil liberties. You say it helped them, but between January and May 1921, the fascists destroyed 120 labor headquarters, attacked 243 socialist centers and other buildings, killed 202 workers, in addition to the 44 killed by police, and wounded 1,144. And during this time, 2,240 workers were arrested, and only 162 fascists were. In the year 1921 to 1922, into Mussolini's seizure of state power, 500 labor halls and cooperative stores were burned. 900 socialist municipalities were dissolved.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I think a lot of these are like how Mussolini came into power, and you can see a lot of similar things. And for example, with the USSR fighting the Black Army, you can see like China found like modern day China funding like anti-Maoist movements and stuff. I mean, anytime there's been like a socialist like party or a socialist like movement or an anti-capitalist movement, there's been infighting amongst those movements. But if we look at the system that Mussolini implemented, so one of the things he talked about was him like destroying labor unions, and a lot of socialists bring up him banning labor unions. However, like he established, right? Like if you look at the fascist labor chart, if you look at the system that he implemented, he established a system of unions, of syndicates, where workers had representation, where they could elect representatives to like control parts of the company. It was like a worker cooperative system essentially. What wasn't allowed was the ability to strike. Workers gave up their right to strike in order for the state to step in and negotiate for the workers and for workers to elect state representatives. Cuba banned strikes. China, I believe they banned strikes. Lenin, under the Soviet Union, when Lenin first came in, he crushed a lot of independent unions. And the reason for that is because it's two things. First of all, independent labor unions can be used by foreign powers that want to undermine the sort of state apparatus in the system. Secondly, in a capitalist system, when labor unions go on strikes, it does halt production. It like disrupts production, and it's effective in a capitalist system. And it's too effective to where if you do it in a socialist system or a system where the economy is collectivized, if a labor union goes on strike, it'll hurt everyone. It won't just hurt the boss. It'll hurt everyone who's working, who's like trying to like depend on that. and that was the reason why labor unions were like they had certain things taken away, but in a way, like they were a lot better under Mussolini because they could elect representatives. They controlled parts of the company. Companies and bosses had to like follow the legislations and the rules of the labor unions. And you can find this in the book, The Economic Foundations of Fascism, where it like lays out the policies implemented by Mussolini.
So I think I forgot to mention something. I said I was going to address it not being completely capitalist, and I forgot to do so. So you would be correct. That's not completely capitalist. There were workers and peasants and large
Yeah.
landlords and industrialists. But going back to one of your first points, what you just said about China funding anti-Maoist movements, you would be correct, and that is because China is capitalist now.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, again, like the Marxist definition of socialism, I feel like is incoherent. I think according to the Marxist definition of socialism, like a ton of countries would actually be like state capitalist or like state socialist and stuff. I mean, like you ask a ton of different Marxists everywhere around. Like 10 Marxists, you ask what their definition of socialism is. You like get 11 different answers, and I think Marx is extremely incoherent when it comes to describing socialism. There's a quote. It says, "Everything Marx says about capitalism is correct. Everything he says about socialism is incorrect." And I feel like what we need to do is take a look at like systems which have greatly benefited workers and which have promoted workers' rights. And I feel like fascism and National Socialism do that to a large degree.
So going back to some being state capitalist, I would socialism, from most people's view, is a transition to communism.
Well,
And
yeah, that's who the Marxists use. Through most people's views today, it's like when the government does stuff or something like that.
yeah, and state capitalism would be a step forward, just as Lenin's NEP, and I would consider that to be a socialist step.
I mean,
Well,
I
China
would.
has just like, completely gone off track.
Oh yeah, you said would I consider that to be a socialist step? I can hear you. Is that what you
I would consider state capitalism to be a step forward from a feudal economy, so I would consider that socialist if it's under socialist leadership, such as Lenin's NEP. So,
would
I know you said that. It wasn't.
okay, you said would I your audio is sounding like a little bit fuzzy to me. Was that a question aimed at me? Did you ask what I consider that socialist or
No, I'm saying you were saying state capitalism or capitalism isn't socialism.
or I said a lot of socialists like call these countries state capitalist as a means of like identifying them against like Marxist and socialist thought.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So we're getting a little off track here. So let's go back to fascism.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So you say he gave unions, but from what I can see, he was funded by these large landowners and industrialists.
Which large landowners and industrialists?
For example, Henry Ford really collaborated with him.
Henry Ford supported the Nazis. He didn't really support. I don't think he supported Mussolini, but if we look at what Henry Ford did, he didn't really give them much donations. He especially didn't give them any donations when they were starting up. What Henry Ford did was he like published things like supporting them like from an American point of view, and that hurt Henry Ford's
yeah. So
like,
I got mixed up.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Feder Zion Industrial industry gave him funds.
What Hitler funds or like
No, Mussolini.
What did?
In 1922, the Federalizione Industriale, composed of leaders of industry along with representatives from banking and agribusiness, met with Mussolini to plan the March on Rome.
I mean, hold on. Can you send me a source for that?
Yes.
All right. You can send it in the chat. But like say they did, that was like I guess a small group. But like there wasn't again like even if you look at Mussolini's policies, like they were very like pro worker. Like he like looking at the system that he implemented a like a guild system like full of syndicates and stuff where workers elected representatives that would partake in economic decisions. If you look at the level of worker rights and under Mussolini's like Italy, for example, when a boss fired a worker, they had to find another job for them. The state sponsored many like worker paid vacations and stuff. Like the state would pay for you to take vacations if you were a worker, which is unthinkable today. One of the first things that Mussolini did was cap the work week. The wages went down because Mussolini like also caused a decrease in inflation. So prices in general went down and wages were adjusted to that. but like overall, workers worked a lot less hours. The state paid for their leisure programs. Like they had a ton of protection. Like Mussolini implemented a vast network of very pro worker policies. He like workers would elect representatives. Like I don't know what policies he implemented that were anti-worker. I mean, you could say that like the unions, or like he banned like certain unions, or he didn't allow them to go on strike. But like they had ways of negotiating with their bosses through like labor courts, where like the workers and the bosses would like talk through their issues, and they would like the decision to be met by the state. This is very similar to Norway's model, where bosses have their unions and workers have their unions, and whenever there's a discrepancy, the state sort of like talks to them, or they like negotiate with each other. Like I still don't see any policies that Mussolini implemented that were anti-worker.
Yeah, so what makes him anti-worker is that he's obviously collaborating with these landlords and industrialists, such as the Federation, and I can't really pronounce that well.
Yeah.
But then you look on to their what they did before the coup, and they are destroying hundreds of labor headquarters, hundreds of workers.
Yeah, but I mean, like Mussolini, I mean, not Mussolini, Lenin destroyed independent unions. Cuba bans worker strikes. Like a lot of these things that you like say that Mussolini did that was like anti-worker, like socialist countries or Marxist-Leninist countries have done that as well. Furthermore, yeah, I mean, you could look at the Mussolini like Wikipedia, and it like talks about it. Let me pull it up. Mussolini Wikipedia. Yeah. It was like the Wikipedia of the economy of Italy under fascism. Let's see. Okay, so on a wider scale, the fascist economic policy pushed the country towards a corporative state, an effort that lasted well into war. The idea was to create a national community where the interests of all parts of the economy were integrated into a class-transcending unity. Some see the move to corporatism in two phases. First, the workers were brought to heel over 1925 to 1927. Initially, the non-fascist trade unions, and later, less forcefully, the fascist trade unions were nationalized by Mussolini's administration and placed under state ownership, conforming to Vladimir Lenin's earlier policies to eliminate independent labor unions in the Soviet Union. This is from the economy of Italy under fascism, that policy. If you look at Cuba bans strikes. I think you can like look this up. I'll link both of these in the I'll send them in the Discord.
Yeah.
And like
So I think these would be sufficient if he wasn't funded by these landlords and industrialists. But not only this, fascism doesn't acknowledge class struggle. I don't understand how you could be considered a socialist and not acknowledge class struggle.
Well, the way that fascism deals with class struggle, because fascists realize that there is such a thing as class struggle, that the different classes have different class interests. However, like if fascists had the ability to like get rid of class, we would, because class is divisive to the national identity. But we realize that anytime any like system tries to get rid of get rid of class, it ends up creating a new class system. Like in the USSR, there's definitely a class system. In China, like in any of these like socialist Marxist Leninist countries, there was always a class system, and it ended up with a class collaboration system. What class collaboration isn't like where like capitalists have all the power and the workers are forced to like heel. Basically what it is you take the interests of like both classes, or all the classes, and you redirect them to where the interests of one would like benefit the interests of the like entire country. You can either do this by taking the existing classes and redirecting class interests that way, or creating a new set of classes based on completely different ideas of interest. Mussolini did this really well, and you can read about this in the Economic Foundations of Fascism in the section Industrial Peace, where it talks about how like workers and bosses like had a level of understanding with each other, right? Like bosses and stuff that were there had to listen to like these worker unions, and workers got accurate representation in these corporations, but there was still a class system. What fascism seeks to do is seeks to like get each class to focus towards the collective good.
Looking at the implementations of fascism, I don't see this. I have this play here from a pro-Nazi Hans Jorst entitled, okay, I cannot pronounce it, I'll send it in the chat. Yeah. But I got a play here, I'll send the title in chat, and I will read it out loud.
Yeah, send it in. You can either I sent the Okay.
So it says, "You won't believe me, Papa, but young people don't pay much attention to these old slogans anymore. The class struggle is dying out." And the father responds, "So, and what do you have then?" August responds, "The Volk community." And what's that slogan? No, it's an experience. My God, our class struggle, our strikes, they aren't an experience as socialism, the international. Were they fantasies, maybe? They were necessary, but they were historical experiences. So in the future, therefore, we'll have your Volk community tell me how you actually envision it. Poor, rich, healthy, upper, lower. All this Jesus with you. Look, Papa, upper, lower, poor, rich, that all exists. It's one important that places on the question that's decisive to life, but like it's not chopped up into working hours and furnished with price charts. Rather, we believe in existence as a whole. None of us regard making money as the most important thing. We want to serve. And the son's comments are revealing that the class struggle is dying out. And then the Papa is obviously concerned about the abuses of class power and class injustices. And he's just dismissed with a frame of mind of no objective reality. And I don't see how you can be considered a socialist if you don't have the view of class struggle, because that's the main component of socialism.
Well, it's the main component of Marxism, but again, there's different forms of socialism, and that play, like, I don't know what, like, I feel like citing a play, like, isn't really like an argument, like, I don't mean to be kind of like a Vosh type, but like citing a play just really isn't an argument. I think, again, like, if you look at like, if you're saying class struggle, like, eliminating class makes you a socialist, then like, no country has like eliminated class. The Soviet Union had a class system. Like, Maoist China, like, all these like communist countries had class systems. There's been no system in society which abolished class, unless if you want to take a look at like the hunter gatherer societies, and you want to say you're like an anarcho primitivist.
Yeah.
But I think like, you have to acknowledge that class is like a natural
Yeah.
part of humanity, and you have to do what you can to take away a lot of those differences, but you can't ever completely abolish it.
Yeah, no society has abolished it yet. But what I'm talking about here is acknowledging it. And this play I view as significant because after Hitler and the Nazis seized power, this play was performed widely throughout Germany. And I would view it as a more accurate representation of what the fascist mindset was like, what the policies were like, what it was like in those countries rather than theoretical texts.
I mean, I mean, the way it was implemented, it was very pro worker. Even under National Socialist Germany, like, there was a quote. Let me find it. But like, even under National Socialist Germany, yeah. So here's the yeah. I'm pulling up the quotes right now. I have a yeah. Yeah, I had to take some screenshots of the like books and stuff, but they guaranteed like a they did a lot of similar things to what Mussolini did. No, not to like a larger degree. Like, I think Mussolini's economic policies were a lot better than what Hitler implemented. But even under National Socialist Germany, like they like enacted like a ton of labor laws. They had the same like sort of state-sponsored vacations. Like, Hitler always talked about like he reinstated the German welfare system. I think you could call the National Socialist economy of Germany like a welfare, like a social democracy. Like, it was almost like that. It wasn't to like as much of a degree as what Mussolini implemented, but it still had a large degree of like labor laws and labor reforms. Like, one of the things that it did was like high luxury like vacations and cruise ships. Like, before, they were only available to the rich. After Hitler came in, after the National Socialist Party came in, they implemented a lot of these like they paid for workers to go on these like fancy vacations. They capped the work week. Like, they had a like ton of like pretty well labor laws. And like, anywhere you look at like these systems, there's always a large degree of worker rights.
So, looking into the workers' rights within Nazi Germany, moving on from Italy, there was a similar pattern between fascists and capitalists. The German workers and farm laborers had won the right to unionize. There was, the 8-hour day and unemployment insurance. But to revive profit levels, heavy industry and big finance wanted wage cuts for the workers and massive state subsidies and tax cuts for themselves. And during the 1920s, the Nazi Okay, the SA, the brown-shirted stormtroopers, they were subsidized by business, and they were mostly an anti-labor paramilitary force whose function was to terrorize workers and farm laborers. And by 1930, most of the tycoons had concluded that the Weimar Republic no longer served their needs and was too accommodating to the working class, and they greatly and they greatly increased their subsidies to Hitler, propelling the Nazi Party onto the national stage. And these business tycoons supplied Nazis with generous funds for fleets of motor cars and loudspeakers to saturate cities and villages of Germany, along with funds for the Nazi organizations, youth groups, and paramilitary forces. And in the July 1932 campaign, Hitler had sufficient funds to fly to 50 cities in the last 2 weeks alone. And in that same campaign, um, they had the majority of people on their side to the extent that they were kind of a reliable base. It generally was among the more affluent members of society. In addition, elements of petty bourgeois and many lumpen proletariats served as a strong arm party thugs. They organized into SA stormtroopers, but the great majority of the organized working class supported the communists or the social democrats to the very end. And in the 1932 elections, there were. Okay, I'm sorry, I got lost. Okay, so among assuming state power, Hitler and his Nazis pursued a political economic agenda not unlike Mussolini's. They crushed these organized labors. They eradicated all elections, opposition parties, and independent publications. Hundreds of thousands of opponents were imprisoned, tortured, and murdered. In Germany, as in Italy, the communists endured the severest political repressions of all groups.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few points. I guess the first thing you brought up was that like the German National Socialist Party was supported by big business. But if you look at the actual fundings, right, this is from the book "The Big Business and the Rise of Hitler." There's a quote. It says Hitler was not yet a major beneficiary of German industry. After weighing all the evidence, we must recognize that the financial subsidies from industry were overwhelmingly directed against the Nazis. The bulk of funds in the party treasury came from membership dues. If you look at the actual like time when they funded the Nazis, it wasn't until after they took power. Like once they took power, they like the Nazis like they they got some support from certain big businesses, which were like opportunists. There's a quote. It's by the I believe it's from the book Adolf Hitler, and it says the quote says, "But contrary to the view that the great banks were the ultimate string pullers of National Socialism, it is in fact hard to think of any other period in modern German history in which these institutions had less influence in the period between 1933 and 1945." Furthermore, a lot of people bring up like bankers like Halmer Schacht, and like Hitler threw a lot of these sort of like bankers and a lot of these industrial like big like international industrial capitalists in concentration camps. What he did, and this is something similar to what Mao did, he sided with certain German industrialists, which a lot of Marxists and Marxist-Leninists would call the national bourgeoisie, and he sided with them against what he called international finance capital, which was the international bourgeoisie. So like a lot of these policies that were implemented by the National Socialist Party were also like taken up and implemented by people like Mao. Furthermore, like people, a lot of socialists and a lot of Marxists like to talk about how Hitler was funded by big business, which did like he wasn't, right. They didn't start getting their fundings till after the Nazi Party. They don't after the party took power and after they were already winning elections. What they don't realize is that the Bolsheviks themselves were actually like funded by a lot of Wall Street bankers. If you read the book Wall Street and the Rise of Bolshevism, you'll look at like the Wall Street bankers, and there's telegram transactions, right, via telegram, where they send like Bolsheviks money. There was one part where Lenin was on like a train and it was full of like Wall Street bankers and it was headed to Russia, or it was like German bankers. And there's even a quote from it was Wall Street and the Rise of Bolshevism, and it says, "We have now gone beyond this evidence to establish a continuing working relationship between Bolshevik banker Olaf Ashberg and the Morgan-controlled Guarantee Trust Company in New York before, during, and after the Russian Revolution. In Tsarist times, Ashberg was the Morgan agent in Russia and the negotiator for Russian loans in the United States. During 1917, Ashberg was financial intermediary for the revolutionaries, and after the revolution, Ashby became the head of the Ruscombank, the first Soviet international bank, while Max May, a vice president of the Morgan-controlled company Guarantee Trust, became a director-in-chief of the Ruscombank foreign department. We have presented documentary evidence of a continuing working relationship between the Guarantee Trust Company and the Bolsheviks. So wherever you look, like the Bolsheviks, there was even the Paris Communes, right? The Paris Communes, when the anarchists there took power, they took power in their vicinity was a Rothschild's bank, and they did not attack the Rothschild's bank whatsoever. The Rothschilds came to them and they were like, don't attack us, we'll give you like loans and stuff, and they agreed. The Paris Commune, like communists, made a deal with the Rothschild banks. Even Engels acknowledged this, where he talks about how if the Paris Commune had like destroyed the Rothschilds banks, which they could have done, right? They would have basically forced the bourgeoisie to negotiate with the proletariat. But like wherever you see it, right, the Bolsheviks and the Paris Commune, both of them had significant influence from like Wall Street bankers and German bankers and like the Rothschilds. Even going back to Marx, right? Karl Marx was a blood relative of the Rothschilds, and his work was like funded by Lionel Rothschild. So like wherever you go, you see that the communism from the beginning was supported by a lot of big bankers and a lot of like capitalists.
But when looking into the implementations of those things, they didn't end too well, with the exception of the Paris Commune, because as that was a fair critique of it. But like looking into the actual policies of the socialist states, it didn't end too well for them. But then you look at these fascist states, both in Hitler and Mussolini, and they were crushing labor union strikes. And going on to one of your earlier statements, we can look into who the fascists supported, both in Italy in the 1920s and in Germany in the 1930s. Old industrial evils have re-emerged as the conditions of labor deteriorated. In the name of saving society from communism, unions and strikes were outlawed. Union property and farm cooperatives were confiscated and handed over to rich party owners. Minimum wage laws, overtime pay, and factory safety regulations were abolished.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that just like isn't true. I don't know where you're getting this information from. So like the first thing you talked about was how they like crushed a lot of these unions. I mean, that happened, but that also happened under, again, like Lenin. He crushed independent unions. Cuba banned strikes. Like if you look at the actual, again, I've repeated this like multiple times. If you look at the actual implementations, like Mussolini implemented a system where workers could elect representatives and they could partake in the economic decisions. That's what a lot of socialists want. That's economic democracy. Again, like what the National Socialists did, like the workers, like I believe it was like the first paid vacations were created in the Third Reich. Like the National Socialists implemented a ton of labor reforms. They had like the state pay for workers' vacations. The state served as a negotiator between workers and like business owners. Like furthermore, like overtime pay, like some of the first overtime laws were created under Mussolini's fascism. If you look at it, it was like so great that it influenced like even American progressives. FDR's entire New Deal was inspired by Mussolini's like corporatist economy. FDR wanted to implement a corporatist economy in the U.S., but like Congress said no.
So I can source the claims you disagreed on, but to add on to it, workers were toiling longer hours for less pay. The already decent wages were severely cut, and in Germany, 25 to 40%, in Italy, 50%, and in Italy, child labor was reintroduced. And I will put that into the sources into the chat right now.
Right. Well, I mean, the one of the first things again that like fascists did was like cap the work week. Mussolini talked about this extensively in the Economic Foundations of Fascism. It talks about how one of the first things that Mussolini did was like cap the work week. That's like one of the core like points that fascists want. Like as far as like labor laws, you talked about wages declined because prices everywhere declined. Italy was suffering from a lot of inflation. Mussolini used the like union system that he implemented to like lower prices, and in doing so wages fell. That was something that happened in Italy. That was something that happened in Germany. I mean, like I already pointed out a lot of the like worker rights that the fascists like implemented under Mussolini. So
So the wages were already dropping before, after the Italy in the post-war recession. Again, as stated, the heavy industry operated way below capacity. The state, the state would have to take back welfare programs, and there's obviously a lot of protests to this, and funded by large landlords and industrialists. Mussolini seemed like the likely candidate to crush those protesters. And historically, looking at what he has done, that has been the case, crushing hundreds of labor unions.
well, yeah, I mean, but like Lenin did that as well. I think we're kind of
Not
going.
nearly to the same extent, though.
Well, he crushed independent unions, but again, there wasn't like a vast majority of like independent unions in like the USSR at that point. But Lenin crushed like any independent union that wasn't like a Soviet union, like one of the unions that are part of the Soviet. Mussolini did a lot of the similar things. So it's like if you say that Mussolini was like this reactionary force used by capitalism when there wasn't really a developed capitalist class in Italy, there weren't really any industrialists in Italy at that time. Italy was like had not really developed capitalism, then you can't like you can't like not hold that same thing for Lenin, who like the Bolsheviks were funded by Wall Street bankers. They negotiated with like German like loan negotiators and stuff, and they did a lot of the same things that Mussolini did. So I don't know, this seems like we're just kind of going around in circles.
Okay,
Like
you want me to respond to that, then we can conclude both conclusion statements?
sure, yeah.
Okay, so I don't think it's the same to nearly the same extent, because you have Mussolini, who was founded on the basis of crushing these people. It had no interest in the class antagonisms that existed. It existed solely for that purposes, and historically you can see that taking place. Lenin, on the other hand, greatly improved the working conditions by way before what it was before. And on it being capitalist, it was half capitalist, I would say. There were industrialists, there were workers, and there was also feudal aspects. There were peasants and there were landlords. And do you want to make a concluding statement? Then I can make
Um,
mine.
yeah. I think like looking at a lot of the like fascist economic policies, like they did greatly help workers. I've cited the economic foundations of fascism. You can read the origins and doctrines of fascism, right? Like fascism originated from like labor unions. The term fasci meant union, and like fascism was like a unionist. It originated from like union movements. Fascism, for the largest part, has been something which was created by working class people, and supported by like overwhelmingly like everyone. So I think overall, like historically, we could see that fascism is in fact a pro-worker movement, even more so than Bolshevism and a lot of communist movements. So I think you know that's all I have to say.
Okay. Here's my concluding statement. So both in Italy and Germany, these two places with completely different histories, cultures, languages, ended up with the same repressive solution because of the compelling similarities of economic power and class conflict that prevailed in their respective countries. And in diverse countries such as Lithuania, Croatia, Romania, Hungary, Spain, a similar fascist emerged due to its utmost to save big capital from the impositions of democracy.
All right. Yeah. So I guess those are closing statements. Thank you for being on, Ian. It was good to discuss politics with someone, and I guess if you want to like shout out your like any sort of like social media, any sort of like anything, you can feel free to.
Follow me on local.tanky on Instagram, and that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, it was good having you on. Well, I hope everyone has a good day. See you all later. I'll put the links for everything in the description for my sources. So yeah. Thanks for being on, and bye.